Dear member of the ELF board, Sharka Prat, dear General Director Peter Pogacar, dear international partners, dear participants of the event, students, guests, dear liberal friends. On behalf of Zavod 14 and Faculty of Public Administration, University of Ljubljana, it is indeed my honor and great privilege to welcome you all at our last international event this actually strange year. We are honestly delighted to have you here at today's event, organized in cooperation with ELF and our partners, Friedrich Neumann Foundation and Faculty of Public Administration of University of Ljubljana. The COVID pandemic is one of the greatest challenges to face society in generations. As the public sector takes the lead in the responding to mitigating and helping resolve this crisis, we are reminded of the fundamental importance of an effective state. The outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic is an event so unprecedented that governments, with few exceptions, has no benchmark of previous experiences to rely on. States are not only expected to craft and deliver high quality public health systems during the pandemic, but must also address the strains on the ordinary routine processes of governance. An effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic requires an effective public administration. Effective administration, in turn, crucially depends on the effort and capacity of the thousands of public sector workers from the front line to the central administration. We all know that government and public organizations operate with a central mandate of protecting citizens and providing services to enhance daily life. As such, governments as a central responder, decision maker, and service provider within disease outbreaks and health emergencies, with the rapidly evolving situation of COVID-19, governments are taking a central role and will continue to do so throughout the outbreak life cycle across the public sector. Organizations at all levels of government can expect a number of potential impacts, and we will discuss about these impacts later, such as increased demand for services with rising citizens' expectations around delivery of virtual services. Then long-run continued move towards digital to enable government service of the future. Furthermore, workforce planning and the need to test the resilience of working virtually. longer-term potential for fundamentally reshaping the government force, and so on. During this pandemic crisis, administrative bodies, which will be our main focus of discussion at the event later today, applied various strategies, techniques, and communication channels to continue carrying out their tasks towards parties to the procedures, as well as effectively organize work among civil service and other agencies. Some of these approaches immediately proved to be a value added also for the future, while others still causing problems when searching for a balance between protection of legally defined public interest and exercising private rights. In order to analyze these responses and related issues for tomorrow's better policy making on both supra and national scales, researchers, also from the Faculty of Public Administration, University of Ljubljana, and their partners, launch international study titled The Impact of the COVID-19 Epidemic on Efficiency of Public Administration, the case of General Territorial Administrative Districts in June 2020. Since individual countries have different administrative structures, the focus was put on the administrative bodies competent to conduct procedures and provide services as general units at the local level. By asking heads or managers of these bodies how they address troubles they had during the pandemic, it is expected to establish the most silent drivers and barriers for classically and remotely run activities and further formulate the recommendations for agile operation thereof in line with the rule of law and other principles of sound public governance. At today's event, we want also to share with you the results of this international study. Moreover, later we would like to hear also from you, from participants, from the head of administrative units, from managers of public organizations, from citizens, your view about the experiences in order to create some policy recommendations for the future and post-COVID period. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Zavod 14 and our partners, we wish you an interesting and fruitful discussion and hope to see you again at our next events, presumably next year. Now, let's continue our introduction, and I would like to welcome at our event member of the Board of Directors of European Liberal Forum, Mrs. Sharka Prat. Ms. Sharka.
Hello, my name is Sharka Prat, and thank you for having me on this discussion. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be here on behalf of the European Liberal Forum. I welcome you to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I am elected board member of the European Liberal Forum and executive of the Institute, Czech think tank, Institute for Politics and Society. But today here I am on the behalf of the European Liberal Forum here. And what to say about this forum is very important, that it's gathering liberally oriented institutions, think tanks and foundations. Together, all these think tanks are creating a platform for dialogue on liberal policies, values, ideas, integration, and above all else, the impact of COVID pandemic and public organizations and how they are challenging what they might global pandemic of COVID-19 and bringing with it economic, social, and political troubles. No country in Europe was left untouched. They were little, but generally widely accepted in the spring. However, now we are seeing the impact on political institutions and on public organizations too. Today, we would like to focus mainly on the situation in Europe and debate the challenges and opportunities for public sector organizations. When the first wave of COVID-19 pandemic came, all the public sector organizations faced a huge challenge as physical actions suddenly couldn't take place and all the activities had to be moved to the online world. Some newly used tools appear to be very effective and can be used even after the pandemic subsidies. But there are still some areas where these tools cannot be used effectively, as there are, for example, legal barriers. Also, the need for international cooperation when challenging global risks might give a new momentum for the deeper cooperation on the European level. What are the challenges and risks to the public sector organizations? How can we fight with it? These are questions that must be asked and answered in the new era. On behalf of the European Liberal Forum, I wish you a pleasant discussion, and I firmly believe that this event will prove fruitful, informative, and productive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharka. And now I would like to ask for a few words from our representatives of the Ministry of the Public Administration, Mr. Peter Pogačar, who is General Director at that ministry. So, Mr. Peter, please.
Thank you so much for the word, and thank you so much for inviting me. I think that the topics of today's conference are really answering the issues in public sector that are on. I think that in this unprecedented crisis that we are facing now all over the world, and especially in European Union, demand an action. I always say that if from every bad thing, something must be good. And what really showed in the time of pandemic is that it increased the reputation of public sector all over the European Union, because then I believe that the citizen realized that public sector is the one who's providing the vital functions of the state. And I think the public sector and the resilience of public sector has never been so important. In the modern with my colleagues.
Yeah, it's now it's okay.
Yeah, I think that my colleagues all over, directors generals all over the European Union, they agree that the public sector reactions were, especially in the spring wave of epidemic, they were amazing. But what even more important, why this today's webinar conference is really important, is that it showed that public sector can be resilient. And we've been talking about the digitalization of public sector for years, all over conferences. We prepare strategies and everything. And then suddenly, in spring, with the first lockdown of epidemic, the digitalization happened overnight. And I think that, I must say, for Slovenia, it increased that on one side, it paid out all the investments in the past that we have done with digitalization of e-services for the citizens. On the other hand, it improved the digital skills of citizens. It increased the usage of e-services used by citizens. So it was really important. Nevertheless, it is really important that we never forget, when we talk about the digitalization of public sector, never forget that public sector are the people, are the public employees. And I will focus in my presentation that will follow, I will focus on the impact that the COVID crisis had on the public employees, how they showed the resilience, and what have we learned from the crisis, and what must not be, what must not happen in the future. What have we learned? So I'm really glad to be here. I will share my experience and maybe some experience that we are having all the from my other colleagues from the European member states. And if I may say, from my position, being the member of the European Union has really proved to be valued also for the administration. I mean, at the beginning of lockdown, directors generals all over the member states, we were all in touch, sharing the information, sharing the communication. And I think this is also what European Union is all about. So thanks again for inviting me. I'm looking really forward for participating in the discussion and share our experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I will transfer my moderating role to Dr. Dejan Raušel, who will now moderate the first part of our event. And please, Dejan.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. So first, thank you for such a nice introduction. So as mentioned, my name is Dejan Raušel, and I'm a researcher at the Faculty of Public Administration, University of Ljubljana. And it is a pleasure for me today to be a moderator of today's webinar on public organizations, adaptations to the new working environment during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we will be talking about especially different challenges and opportunities. So during the next hour, we will address the topic from different perspectives. So first, we will hear some experiences from the Ministry of Public Administration. Later on, I will briefly present you some interesting results of our international survey on the impact of the COVID-19 on the administrative units. And last but not least, there will be additional presentation on country case studies from Slovenia, Germany, Czech Republic, and Turkey. But before we start with the presentations, I suggest that we first only listen to these presentations, and after that, when all presentations will be finished, we can have a discussion on the topics addressed in presented. And now I would like to give my word to Mr. Peter Pogačar, so to present his presentations and to share with us his experiences or experiences of Ministry of Public Administration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really not sure now, Dan, will you put my presentation on, or is it my job? Because now we can be able to check our digital skills of the labor force in public administration right now, but I will try to...
Okay, you can try maybe for yourself first, but I can also do it for you.
Yes, please just do it. And I'm good with talking, but I have, as all the civil service leaders, some lack of digital skills, so please. So much for inviting me today. I will try to keep my presentation within limited time, but it's so interesting topic that you put in today. Maybe just for our international participants, some figures. Public sector in Slovenia consists out of 180,000 public employees. This is the whole public sector, all the professions in public sector, and on the other hand, we have 32,000 so-called civil servants. Central public administration consists out of 14 ministries, 9 government offices, and 58 administrative units. And we are really special. We are a country with 2 million residents, and we have 212 municipalities. I will just sweep through the real challenges of Slovenia, which of course, one really important is the negative demographic projection of Slovenia. You can see now the share of population in green, and this is shows in the future how the share of employed active population, that's the population share between 20 and 64, is decreasing through the time. Of course, I will not go now, next slide please, because of limited time, what are the reasons, what will be the consequences in the social security system, but maybe focus only what does it mean for our labor market. For our labor market, it means 2 things. It means that the share of so-called older workers is increasing. Maybe just for the beginning, in civil service, now practically almost 30% of civil service is over 50 years old, and it is like a real challenge. And on the other hand, it will mean a lack of workforce. So a lack of workforce in the labor market, and of course the public sector is competing for the workers in the labor market. So next slide, please. When it comes to the challenges of the labor market in public sector is, for once, aging of workforce, and on the other hand, lack of workforce. In Slovenia, like 10 years ago in public sector, we were talking about competition for a job. You know, every open job spot, we had like 100 applicants, candidates we could really select. But now we came to a phase where we are competing for the skilled worker to work in public sector. Next slide, maybe. Just switch to the next slide. So future challenges in the public sector are, of course, aging of workforce that will put an increased effort on HRM, lifelong learning, and digital skills. If you have so many older workers, that comes the question of lifelong learning. Do we invest in people throughout their career in their lifelong learning ability? Do we invest in their digital skills? Because one of the stereotypes, as you know, of the older workers are that they have lack of digital skills, and it is really important for the future. If we are talking about the digitalization, e-government, etc., we have to invest also in the digital skills of public employees. Of course, one next challenge is, of course, also how to make the salaries regulation in Slovenia, which is really rigid, from automatism towards the performance pay. So we are trying to implement more performance pay. About the future of work, of course, digitalization brings new forms of work. It brings skills of work, and of course, it will mean the threat is that it will reduce the number of jobs. And what I think with digitalization is really of the most significance is skills, digital skills. As Director Schleicher from the OECD once nicely put it, skills are the oil of the 21st century. So in the future, the public sector will compete for the skilled worker. Next slide. What will be, by our opinion, impact on employment with digitalization? Of course, digitalization improves the productivity. It reduces the number of existing jobs, but it also creates new jobs. New jobs also in public sector, but these new jobs are more productive, of course, but they demand different skills. They demand higher digital skills. So are we ready for this? The one thing I would like to, maybe next slide, please. One thing I would like to put here, that digitalization is amazing, but impact on work, we should not neglect the risk coming with digitalization. Flexible organization of work, we will talk about it today, but what are the risks? One risk that I would like to, I mean, it's amazing. We all have the ability of having access to business emails on our gadgets, iPads, iPhones, and I think it's amazing. But have you ever noticed that, and also by the study put by the Eurofund, that whoever has an access to the business emails on his gadget, on average, he's working 1 hour on average more every day, because at the end of the day, you still go through your emails, right? So actually the question here is, and one we should be aware of is, okay, it's great, I can telework, I have all the digital access and everything, but when does my day work actually stops? Is it normal that I'm on in touch with my minister. Well, not me, I'm Director General. I'm supposed to be available 24 hours per day. But for all the other workers, for all the other colleagues, when does his job stops? So if we will go to the next slide, in public administration, the data strategy that was made till 2020 and it's actually expiring this year, we put a lot of emphasis in the human resource management. And I think that the important part of this strategy at the Ministry of Public Administration was also implemented. Next slide, maybe. In next year, we will implement the revival of internal labor market. We will implement the digital app. It will, to put it shortly, it will be like LinkedIn for the civil service. So civil servant will be able to apply for a job, just not looking for a particular job, just put himself into the internal market. And the employers in civil service can go to the app, look who's available, who would like to change, and we think we will increase the mobility between the civil service sector. And I think that rotating people, that increased rotation when it's not obliged, is really important. Next slide. Really important. I'm really proud of it. It was last year. It was voted as in the final of best HRM project in Slovenia labor market, also in private sector. It was establishment of competency model for civil service. We next year it will be this competency model, which is already used in the civil service, will be digitalized. It will be a huge improvement to make the civil service more efficient, and it will also be used in a selection process also for the top civil service leaders. And now let me just, to this brief introduction, go to the next slide. Also next slide, please. In about the time of COVID epidemic. As I mentioned already in my introduction, in Slovenia, we had from the middle of March, we had total lockdown. It was really interesting because it was the same day as a new government was appointed, which is always also stress for civil service. But actually, we adopted practically overnight measures that provided the vital functioning of the vital functions of state for public sector. So maybe what have we learned? We have learned that public administration can be agile and responsive. We broke down a lot of negative stereotypes that we have about the public administration, that it's rigid, non-resilient and everything. Overnight, 90% of civil service shifted to remote work. We upgraded very quickly our use of digital skills. We reallocated or hired the workforce due to urgent needs. We paid bonuses for dangerous work and special workload. And we switched all our training programs in civil service to distance learning program. This was really amazing. What were we able to do in like no time, in like 2 or 3 weeks? So with next slide, public administration, what have we learned is that it can be resilient and it can use a crisis management tool. We really adapted quickly to new circumstances. And I must say that division of competences in crisis have proved to be adequate and it functioned well. It was really what I have learned personally as the one who was like responsible for functioning of the whole civil services, that it has never in the history been more important the competences of the civil service leaders. You could see how different they were reacted. And this is the crisis management was really important to see how the civil service leaders responded to the situation. Actually, the civil service prepared several anti-corona packages to contain the COVID epidemic and mitigate its consequences for citizens. Additional staff was also hired, so we prepared actually everything. So what about future in public sector? The one thing is certain. We should take what came out really good, and we should never go back to the old way that we were working. In what has proven in this fight, this COVID crisis, was that it's really important about the communication skills and leadership competences. The civil service managers had to learn overnight new way of communications, new way of crisis communication, and new way of organization processes. So actually, next slide, you can just switch it on then, because this is the OECD principles for a for purpose public service, and it really follows. So what will mean the future? The future of public sector will mean efficient use of digital technologies. Digital technologies will radically change the way public administration works and will transform the work that employees do. There will be more interconnected organization, there will be more virtual teams and technologically supported workplaces. However, never forget, we should not only invest in technology, but also, and by my opinion, even more, in people and the places in which they work. Next slide, please. The public sector should become a learning organization. The skills need to keep pace with new technologies. I must admit that the crisis also showed that in the past we didn't put enough effort to these lifelong learning processes. You could see the older civil servants having lack of digital skills, and it was so hard for them to adapt. Which new skills will be important? Not only technical specializations, but also critical thinking, creativity, judgment, innovation. But the most important skill, of course, will be the skill to the ability to continuously learn and adapt. So my conclusion here would be the public administration should become a learning organization. We will have a challenge how to employ new talents with the right mix of skills and knowledge. We are competing in the labor market all the time. So how will we attract and retain talents in public administration? Is salary the only baseline, or will we be able to show them about the values of public sector, that this is actually a really cool place to work, etc. The next slide would be, so what now? Actually, in April, we had at the OECD, we had discussion about the telework in the civil service. And I said that, and of course, in the spring, the idea was, okay, it will last for 1 month and then everything will go back to normal. So now we are hit by the second wave, and we are asking ourselves, what if this is a new normal? I must say that I've been professionally talking about the future of work for years now, but actually future of work is now here. So our challenge will be rethinking of public employment. We should never go back to the old ways of working. We have the opportunity now to renew the image of public sector as an attractive workplace and environmental friendly. So never forget, to end this, it is all about the people. You can buy hardware anywhere, but the main challenge for public sector is how to put the right people in the right places, how to educate them, how to make them competent and adapt to the new normal. So I hope I didn't break a time limit, but thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentations. So I think that it was just in time. And now I will continue with my presentation on international perspective. So I will present you briefly our results of our international survey, which we prepared with other partners or members of consortium. And just a moment to share my presentation with you. Okay. Okay. I hope you can see my presentation. I will just full screen. Okay. So, okay. As I mentioned before, I would like to briefly present you our international survey about the impact of COVID on the public administration organization. And so for the introduction, what was the main goal, or what is the main goal of our survey? The main goal is actually to identify key challenges and opportunities and present an international comparative analysis of selected public administration organizations. So in this case, administrative units during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the main purpose of our study is or was to design the proposals for policymakers and public managers through which public administration would operate compliant to good governance principles such as efficiency, rule of law, participation, etc. So in order to achieve our goal and of course our purpose, we tried to collect the data. And the data was gathered through a web-based survey covering selected European Union and non-European Union countries, which and this questionnaire was available online to public managers, so of these general administrative districts, from the beginning of June until the end of August 2020. Here on the right-hand side, you can actually see our sample size we have in this study. So you can actually see this study was performed in 10 different countries, including Slovenia. And we have here Central Eastern European countries, as well as countries who are not members of the European Union, for example, Russia, Turkey, also China. And based on this data or analysis made from this data, we can obtain some interesting findings, which will be presented now. So as regards procedures and services, especially from the perspective of good governance, from our study, it is evident that the most emphasized principles are responsiveness, efficiency, and accountability. And on the other hand, the least emphasized principles during the COVID-19 pandemic was rule of law and participation, for which I think it is very alarming state. So if we compare, or if we can look more in detail, so on the one hand on the responsiveness and on the other hand participation, we can actually see that Central Eastern European countries, including Slovenia, rank at the lower half in terms of responsiveness as well as in terms of participation. If we move forward, so also to the procedures and services, but from the perspective of digitalized relations, we can also obtain some interesting findings. So here I have 3 different rankings of countries according to degree of digitalizations, degree of their digitalization in vertical relations, in horizontal relations, and relations to parties. And what is interesting for me is that you can actually see that, for example, Turkey ranks high in all 3 aspects. On the other hand, we have Czech Republic, which ranks low in all of 3 aspects. But for Slovenia, this fact is very interesting for me. So Slovenia is actually ranking high in vertical relations, including with relations to the parties, but very low in horizontal relations. So I think that this is one interesting issue that we can discuss later when we will finish with all our presentations. And then about human resource management in terms of employment measures for Central European Eastern countries, and of course, including Slovenia, the interesting is that there were no additional employment due to the urgent work needs, for example, due to the COVID. But on the other hand, there was a relatively high temporary relocation of these workers, so due to the urgent work needs. Then, as regards financial resource management, so in Central European countries, salaries costs were not higher during the COVID-19 pandemic in comparison with normal situation. This is the case especially for Poland and Slovenia, and similar also applies for the material costs. But on the other hand, here we have countries such as Russia and Germany, which appeared to have a significantly higher salaries as well as material costs during the COVID pandemic. And this is also maybe one interesting point that could we discuss at the end of our presentations and case studies. And what about time after the pandemic? Of course, after the COVID-19 pandemic, public administration will strive to maintain selected good practices in different areas. So we actually identified 3 different areas. So these are digitalization, law, and organizational management. So if we look, let's say, at those rankings, Germany and Romania will be, for example, more focused, especially focused on digitalization, while non-European Union countries, especially Mexico and Russia, they will be more focused on organizational management perspective and the law. And what about Slovenia? Slovenia, according to our results, will be more focused on digitalization and law, but less on organizational management. So here I listed some policy implications for the future. So these are that public managers, especially as we saw during the presentation, public managers in Central European Union countries should strive to increase certain principles of good governance. Especially we saw these principles are responsiveness and participation. This can be done especially by enhancing digitalization in vertical as well as in horizontal relations. However, for some countries, especially Russia and Poland, it is important to provide adequate combination of human resource management measures that are tailored to their needs in order to increase efficiency. So we saw from the previous slide that Russia and Poland was relatively high in these rankings as regards human resource management measures. And in order to increase efficiency, there is still room actually for improvement in establishing appropriate financial controls to manage operating costs, so salaries and material costs especially. And in the end, after the COVID pandemic, the public managers, especially those from non-European Union countries, should put more emphasis on digitalization, since it has become an important tool or mechanism for facilitating communication as well as work. So this was a brief presentation from my side. So this international aspect. Of course, we can discuss some issues that I emphasized later when the presentation, overall the presentation will be finished. But now I would like to invite our next presenter, Polonca, Professor Dr. Polonca Kovac. to present her case on Slovenia. Thank you.
Firstly, let me say hello to everybody and to show respect to our Slovenian guests. Just a few words in Slovenian language. Lepo pozdravljeni, zlasti predstavniki Ministrstva za javno upravo, načelniki upravnih enot ter študenti. Now I will switch back to English. My topic is to present results that have been already frameworked by Dejan for the context of Slovenia. So what are the specific conditions and also results regarding Slovenian situation? And however, to be able to assess those results, I think especially for foreign guests and for comparative reasons, we need to check what are the basic characteristics of Slovenia as opposed to other countries. What is characteristic for Slovenia is that this is an independent state since 1991, being part of former Yugoslavia before that, which is especially important due to administrative tradition, administrative legacies that are built in our, let's say, legal, political, macroeconomic, but also administrative system. And with regard to, let's say, different indicators that have been measured through time on global scale, one of important data, I think, is that GDP per capita is in Slovenia approximately a bit less than 90% of the EU 27 average, stating for the last year, 2019. Slovenia is otherwise a small state, which is also important because, as has been already emphasized, 2 million population is rather small, like compared to Germany, for instance. But on the other hand, like they say, I remember some commercials for Twingo, the car. I think it has been said like that. Even the smaller one needs to have what the bigger ones do. So if we talk about the state, the governance, public governance, of course, regardless of having 80 million, 40 million or 2 million population, certain structures have to be put in function. And therefore, it's important to stress that Slovenia has, besides being part of Yugoslavia, being also previously part of Austrian Empire, which is, even though it's about 100 and 200 years ago, still very important, since so-called concepts and also culture of Rechtsstaat, so rule of law, legality, sometimes even formality, excessive formality, is very, well, it's attributed to Slovene public bodies, public authorities. However, there are certain reforms put in place that try to do the job, especially driven by European Union, in more, let's say, some would say modern, some would say liberal, some would say pushed way, meaning that we go for, I don't know, cutting red tape and other privatization even of public services in these directions. But these, let's say, inputs are rather inconsistent. So we still actually do the job in Slovenian public administration, mostly by the Max Weber's theory. In Slovenian public administration, there is one peculiarity, one specifics that is highly different from other countries. That is that we have two levels, two tiers actually of power. So on one hand, we have the state, central government with various bodies. And on the other hand, we have local self-government with municipalities. But those two levels of governance are not directly interdependent. So actually, when we talk about administrative units as local part of state, central government, this is not to be mixed up with municipalities. Like, I don't know, so different tasks, different competencies are in place. And one has to have this in mind when preparing different surveys, analyses, and of course, interpreting results. So state administration in Slovenia is consisted out of ministries, but on local level, 58 administrative units that are actually like this picture on the right side shows through all the country. Our country, as probably also some foreigners are familiar with, is in a form of a chicken. And here we have 58 parts of this chicken. But what do administrative units do, which is important when we talk about digitalization, modernization, search for resilient administration, etc., is that administrative units are first instance body with regard to the framework of administrative procedures, meaning to decide upon individual rights and obligations of physical but also legal entities, like acquiring building permits or deciding about or taking care of residencies, or also there are some competencies in the field of social affairs or in the field of, I don't know, agriculture, etc. There are different, more than 100 different procedures. Of course, there are also other tasks. The majority of this authoritative, not service-oriented work is done by administrative units in Slovenia. Further, since there are 58 administrative units, there are some differences among themselves, even though they have to follow the same law, they are part of the same structure, they have the same information support, or lack of it. But what is really important for administrative units that have been for the last, let's say, 15 to 20 years, like a flagship of the Slovenian public administration. So being forerunners in presenting good governance principles, even though that are, of course, coordinated top-down by sectoral ministries and also Ministry of Public Administration with regard to these joint issues like, I don't know, financial management, employment, and similar. Further, when we talk about measuring or interpreting efficiency of or in public administration and administrative units in particular, I think it's very important to understand that efficiency, that's why I put this word in the title, as you can see in brackets. So what is meant by efficiency? Because especially managers and economists would always say, aha, efficiency is about ratio between input and output, and efficient organization is the one where output exceeds inputs, or the less input is given for the same output, the better. However, this is not necessarily the case in public administration in general, but specifically also on the level of administrative units, since efficiency in administrative system and also from legal point of view, also by European pieces of legislation, is understood broader, like effectiveness in management language. So to meet goals that are put forward for certain type of public institutions. And what is really or should be characteristic for administrative units or any body of public administration is to follow the rule of law. Not being formal for the sake of formality, but to follow those constitutional guarantees and also protection of public interests. So to take care of efficient public policies on local, or if you want to say like that, in real practice. So for Slovenian administrative units, I think we can say that from Weberian or neo-Weberian model of public governance through years over time, I think we can say that a lot of awareness has been put top-down, but also bottom-up, into the shift from, let's say, pure hierarchy, pure reactive approach to more good governance-oriented mode of doing. With regard to digitalization, it's important to know that not individual administrative units run their own systems, system, but Ministry of Public Administration is in fact competent or should take care, is responsible, not just to coordinate support, and of course not just support, but digital transformation, at least according to policy papers, on the level of administrative units, but for the whole administration in the country. However, there are some, let's say, successful points that Slovenian public administration has been even awarded at different levels, like by United Nations or by European Commission, for presenting and forcing individual projects. For instance, portal e-Uprava, that means in Slovene language e-government or e-administration. And this portal has taken a very important role also during first and now second wave of COVID pandemic. But I wouldn't fully agree with Mr. Pogačar when he said so, let's say, proudly, that Slovenian administration has proved to be agile and to be resilient. I would say that reactive is not already responsive and proactive as agility teaches us. So I think here, with regard to digital maturity, we still have, because theoretically we know we have 4 levels of digital maturity, 1 being e-government, 2 open government, 3 smart citizen-oriented governance, and 4 real, true digital maturity. I would definitely not put Slovenia over 3, but below it. However, crises like pandemics could be an opportunity, not just the burden, as has been already put forward. And I think we could safely say that according to the results that were given by heads of all 58 administrative units in Slovenia, because we have gathered almost 500 responses, I mean, at least for certain questions of our survey, because survey that has been submitted to heads of administrative units was sent in June 2020 this year. And majority, or at least to any question, at least 77% of respondents answered. But actually all 100%, all units answered at least half of all questions. But what is important to say is that I will not repeat, but just remind you that epidemic has been declared officially during the first wave in Slovenia in mid-March and has lasted until 1st of June. However, there were some, let's say, outbursts further on. And in the springtime, Slovenia generally has proved to manage pandemic or epidemic on governmental level rather successfully, which is unfortunately not the case now in autumn, because Slovenia is one of the 3 most affected countries presently with regard to how many people per million got infected, ill, or even died. So it's a question whether and to which extent we can say that digitalization, digitalized approach to work and also to communicate between public authorities and parties or citizens or businesses is really has really met the goal. But we can say, as has been already pointed out, that our survey that has been also based on Sigma as a joint initiative between OECD and European Commission. So Sigma has actually done one of first comparison among members of member states of European Union in April of this year. And based on these findings and let's say elements that have been put forward, we have also prepared the survey firstly for Slovenia and further on for other countries, 10 countries, all in all gathered into international comparison. But what I want to say is that also we are grateful from the Faculty of Public Administration, University of Ljubljana, to Ministry of Public Administration, because Ministry of Public Administration strongly supported this survey in order to get data for future, hopefully, at least that was declaratively set, for future policies. So to change the law, to support portals like e-Uprava, e-government portal, etc. What is important is that internal and external relations have been examined, addressed. By internal, we mean in between public administration, could be vertically from administrative units to ministries or vice versa, but also horizontally. So, for instance, certain life events require joint elaboration of one citizens by administrative unit, but also center of social work or municipality, or I don't know, mapping survey mapping authority. With regard to results got from heads of administrative units, I have prepared here 3 slides or 4 slides. Firstly, what are the general findings? And regarding general findings, I think what is important is to see that even digitalization has been based on the opinions and experiences and data of heads of administrative units, even lower, as I have said before, with putting 2.5 figure in front, which is the result of OECD and European Commission assessment. So actually we have been dealing, administrative units have been dealing with parties specifically, so external citizens, external relations, but also inwardly with regard to internal cooperation or lack of cooperation, rather scarcely. So I would say that digitalization has not proved to be as a driver for modernization, but vice versa. So crisis, especially demands of parties, of citizens and businesses, have increased digitalized way of work by administrative units. And I agree with Mr. Pogačar that administrative units have acted very responsibly, but not proactively. Not, of course, by their fault to say so, but lack of systematic approach on the field of digitalization. What is, I think, also very important to state for Slovenian case, and it's not characteristic for all countries, is that in Slovenia, we have learned so far, at least sometimes even painfully, that if you do any reform, any progress, you have to take care at the same time legal aspect, organizational aspect, or managerial aspects, but also, of course, IT or ICT or digitalization. So any digitalized approach or project or aim cannot be achieved successfully if not supported, enabled, for instance, also by legal, sound legal base. Like it was said in the beginning, within the introductions, law can be sometimes seen as a barrier, but in this case, we have found out with our survey in Slovenia that law has been actually a supporter, enabler of digitalization since Ministry of Public Administration prepared together with Ministry of Justice. So the same law was valid in force for administration, but also court judicial proceedings, and has been adopted in Parliament, so-called COVID-19 Administrative Procedure Act. Okay, I have translated the title of the law a bit, but what is important with regard to this law, for Slovene listeners, this is the law called ZZUSUDZ, Zakon o začasnih ukrepih v upravnih in drugih javnopravnih zadevah. So this law is very important because has temporarily, for 2 months only, but effectively simplified communication, let's say filing applications, notifications, organizing video conferences, etc. Also suspending deadlines for the time being. And at least in my view, and I think also Ministry of Public Administration has the same opinion, this law proved to be actually something to go for it, even in future, as permanent solution. But generally, there are, let's say, two caveats, two things to be aware of, or concerns to take into the account when preparing policies of digital transformation in future. One is that digitalization is not only something which is beneficial, but has certain side effects and also limits. And secondly, digitalization can be seen as a tool and must not be seen as a goal in itself. Otherwise, it's a short-term success that we measure. With
Okay,
regard
Polonca, sorry to interrupt. So can you please conclude your results and thoughts, please? Because we are limited. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
With regard to procedures and services, it has been seen, like I said before, that citizens have required more digitalized approach, and this was hugely evident. I mean, the evidence is really strong. So we can see that this part, so administrative procedures under the requirement of parties have been digitalized mostly. But I think it's of concern that legality and participation were rather low. I mean, this results so that we have high demand of parties, but low participation in comparison to other good governance principles is not consistent. And secondly, there are some minuses, some side effects, like administrative units have reported in not so small share that even though that number of parties using different simplified e-communication, like filing applications, are actually have affected as more bigger burden for officials, for administrative units, because they have had to check like identity of applicants, etc. Diane has already put forward what was important from the view of financial management, but with regard to human resource management, I think it's also, let's say, not confirming what has been said by Director General, that the Slovenian administration has acted very responsibly, since only 6% of administrative units employees, civil servants, have worked remotely. Majority was staying at home and just waiting for work. And finally, I would say, like I already pointed out, that some of digitalized legal and organizational and managerial measures can really turn Slovenian public administration into digitalized and responsive and learning organization. If you do it only on one level, the results will be very short-sighted. And I have put here on the left into foreign languages. So when we learn from other countries, like also on the field of digitalization, we have to, of course, understand, not just copy different solutions. And in Latin, festina lente means we should take it step by step, because if you go too rapidly, again, the effect will be counterproductive. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Polonca Kovač, thank you for your in-depth presentation of Slovenian case. And so to proceed with our presentations, now I would like to invite our partners from Germany, so Dr. Bernhard Hirsch and Dr. Fabienne Sophie Schäfer, to present their German case. Thank you.
Thank you, Dijan. In the name of and myself, I would also like to welcome all of this workshop. And we will now German case, as Germany is a typical continental federal system, and how COVID-19 impacted and German public administrations. Divided our presentation into 4 parts. I will give you a short introduction about how COVID-19 developed in Germany, the economic and social developments, provide you with a timeline of the measures that were implemented by the German government. Bernhard Hirsch will also describe how the virus impacted on the work of the German public administrations. When we now first take a look at the COVID-19 numbers in Germany, we can see that the first case in Starnberg was actually reported at the end of January. And during February, there were cases of COVID-19 reported. At the beginning of March, when COVID raised to a maximum time, leading to the German government declaring a pandemic at the end of March, actually when the highest level of case numbers were hit. Then during summer, it all seemed like we had the pandemic people were outside, spending time outside, and case numbers were rather low. And once the case numbers raised extremely, so that we are now considered to be in the second wave. In economic and social developments, for the economic development, we can see that the lockdown, which was then implemented in regards to the first wave of coronavirus cases, resulted in drastic economic effects. This is also true for other European countries, as we can now see on this graphic, which also provides information for the Czech, Polish numbers in comparison to the EU 27. Look at the unemployment rate as also an economic and social number, we can see that for the German case, there's only a slight increase in the unemployment rate as government allowed short-time work, which yielded in a lower unemployment rate in comparison to if this allowed have been in place. When we now take a look at the social effects, we have now here a graphic of the weekly death, and we see that especially during the first wave, there was a high number in the death rate. When the case numbers were even lower, there were basically a number in the death. We don't have any actual numbers from the week 43 on, but it seems like during the news or with is that also the death number rises again with the second wave. And if we now take a look at the measures that were taken by the German, keep in mind that Germany is a federal system, down the federal system into 3 levels. Federal level, then we have the federal states and the federal states, which are 16 in Germany. And then we have the districts, which are actually the participants in the survey. So what happened? After the first case was reported on January 31, we had the obligation to register for COVID-19 cases. About a month later, the Federal Ministry of the Interior and the Federal Ministry of Health set up a crisis team in order to provide measures and to respond to the crisis about to happen. So on March 22nd, we had the first lockdown called restricted contact. So people were only allowed to meet a certain number of people. Moreover, there were stay-at-home orders, school closures, business closures, and event cancellations. March 25th, the federal level passed 2 bills, namely the COVID-19 Relief Act and the act to protect the population in an epidemic situation of national importance, leading to hospitals leaving beds empty in order to respond to COVID-19 numbers. Then, when lower of COVID-19 on May, there was an ease of restrictions, which kept on during summer, but then case numbers rose again. The government decided that districts that had an incidence value above a certain number had to do measures or to implement measures again in order to combat. Yet this did not lead to lower case numbers. So on October 28th, the government decided to do a second called the light lockdown. Yesterday there was the agreement that the second lockdown will now be extended, probably to December the 20th, and then leading to lower measures for Christmas, but then being another lockdown after the 1st of January 2021. So now I will turn to Bernhard Hirsch, who will now talk about how COVID-19 impacted the work of German public administration.
Okay, thank you, Fabienne, for introducing the situation in Germany. What Fabienne already mentioned is that it's a quite complicated federal system in Germany. So the decisions which were made about the lockdown and so on, they have to be more or less decided by the Länder, by the 16 countries, and all this has to be discussed with Mrs. Merkel, with the central government. So it's a pretty complicated decision-making process, yeah, with a lot of politics in between, which makes it somehow complicated. Nevertheless, all levels of public administration are affected by this Corona or COVID crisis management. And what I would like to show you now is to give you some examples of different levels of public administrations, how they are affected. Of course, I will give you some first data from our study we did on the local level, but I will also show you some concrete measures, some concrete reactions to this crisis on a federal level, and I can also say some words for the second level for the Länder. I start with a local level. Some information we did not ask for in the survey, but just to know, because these institutions were affected very much. Of course, the public health authorities are extremely affected by this crisis because they have to count the cases. They are responsible to care that the people who are infected stay at home in a quarantine and so on. So, and this had, of course, consequences on their work, this crisis. The organization is, or the logic is that this local public health authorities, which are typically located on a county level, have the power to put the people in quarantine and have to coordinate the test centers and so on. And I think they did a quite well job, but they really came to limits, yeah, to capacity limits. As the case numbers raised, they struggled to keep up the workflow. They had to phone all the people which could be infected by others, and therefore, and this is also quite interesting from my point of view, they were supported from employees, from voluntary employees from other levels, even from the German military and from other public institutions. So they had to assist them to go on in the call center and to call people which could be affected and to send them in quarantine. Perhaps let's go to the next slide. I would also like to show you some experience we collected in a working group with about 15 ministries and agencies, most of them on the federal level in Germany. And this working group exists for about 10 years now, including Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Interior, I already said, the German Bundesbank, and also the Federal Employment Agency. So a lot of interesting members. And we also did some workshops with them, yeah, just asking them, what did you do? Which impact did this COVID crisis had on your daily work, the organization of your work? And some ideas, some um, um, uh, experiences I would like to share with you. So what did most of these agencies do? They, of course, had to react in terms of finding ways to keep up the workflow. So the public administration had to function even this crisis time. So most of them implemented a crisis management team to implement rules and measures. This happened quite well. Yeah, it worked in a very short time period. But what also Polona was talking about, they had to send their employees in working from home. Yeah, and this the experiences, this worked differently. So not always it was the case. For example, in the Federal Ministry of Finance, 100% of the employees were able to work at home, because they all had the equipment even before the crisis. And this was very easy for them to send the people working from home. Many other agencies told us, well, that's not so easy. Yeah, we also had to send people at home, and they were not allowed to work for us. Yeah, this was the case also in other agencies. It was not. It was a hardware problem. Yeah, to struggle. That the people could really work at home, and sometimes, of course, it was a problem of connecting them. So the internet connection and all the capacities to dial in were not always given. Perhaps one concrete example, which of a company which is, from my point of view, a very good example how to work, how to work with the crisis, how to react to the crisis, is the Federal Employment Agency. Fabienne told you that we only had a small increase of people out of work, because we have this tool, this instrument, which was also very successful in the financial crisis situation, that we have a so-called short-time work compensation, that companies are getting paid by the government, by the employment agency, when they do not skip out their workers. They keep them in the process. Yeah. And during a time period, I think 4 weeks, yeah, there came in 10 million applications during this first lockdown. And the agency had to react on this. And this means, for example, that they totally shifted, or that they really shifted a lot of people from one department to this department was being responsible for the short-time work compensation. So this department had 600 employees before, and this crisis time, they shifted more than 9,000 other employees to work on these applications of short-time work compensation. The agency also sent 25,000 servants to work from home. Yeah, of course, they had to create new remote work capacities, but what these guys told us, it really worked well. And what is also an interesting aspect from our point of view is that also the internal management reporting, the controlling, we say, had to change, or had their daily habits. Yeah, they had to react, and they had to define new performance measurement indicators, KPIs, to be able to report to the board, to the top management of the BA, about the performance, for example, on working on this short-time work compensation, and other important figures. This was perhaps a big overview for the federal level. Perhaps we go to the next slides, and to give you some insights about our specifics in the survey, in the international survey we did. Perhaps one interesting question we picked up is how the crisis impacted the work of the administrations. Yeah, for example, one question. Yeah, the instructions defining the competences of the administrative units, did they change? Yeah, and there is no clear answer on this. Yeah, some say, well, we have higher competences on a local level now, on the county level. Some others say they remained equal. Others said they got smaller. So no clear impact on the power, I would like to say, how the local administrations could react on the crisis. If you look on the right part of this this slide, we see the answers of the questions. The frequency of challenges troubled. As a head of these counties, did they become bigger or smaller? Yeah, a third of them said, well, we had higher troubles. Yeah, we are much more under pressure now during the crisis. But a lot of answers also said, well, it's still the same level of stress level, I would like to say, we have in this situation. Perhaps we go to the next slide. Just some other ideas for the local level. Average share of employees working at the workplace. Yeah, this is quite similar to what I said on the federal level. Yeah, they were not able to put all the people in the offices. Yeah, they had to send them somehow working from home. But
Hart, sorry for interrupting you. So can you please maybe briefly conclude your
last slide,
presentation?
1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a kind of mixed result also. So some administrations were able to send them at home, yeah, but not all of them. And the last result we have is utilization of home space. Yeah, this is quite similar to what I said before. Is yes. It's somehow done. Yeah, they were able to react on this, but they also had some problems. So to conclude, perhaps, yeah, there is a lot to do to be able to react on such a crisis. Polona mentioned this digitalization logic. From my point of view, there has to be done a lot in this digitalization issue to be able to better react on such a crisis on the local level, at least. Okay, that's it. I hope I'm still in time done, and thanks for attending our presentation.
Okay, Bernhard and Fabienne, thank you very much. So, and let's go now to the case of Czech Republic. So I will kindly invite Maria Bochata to present. And if possible, please be brief and exact, if possible, so to try to conclude your presentation within 7 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, this is quite a challenge. Thank you. I don't know whether you can see my presentation. Is it on the screen?
No, but you should share.
Yeah,
so I can also share it for you if.
That would be really great.
Okay.
So thank you very much for that, Dejan. And I would like to base my presentation on two sources of information. One, of course, being our survey, and the other one are independent experts' opinions. These people are members of the Network for the Protection of Democracy, and I am benefiting for their report prepared for the first half of this year, and also from exchanges of views among members of the working group on public administration, because I'm also a member of that group. And frankly, I was quite surprised that these two sources of information, which have a different focus and perspective, converge. So I planned to start with a very brief introduction describing the situation in public administration in my country, to be able to better understand the situation. However, due to shortage of time, I have to skip that. Only should stress that our public administration reform is in effect since 2003, and its focus was primarily on the territorial structure. And despite promises made during negotiations of the EU membership, the Civil Service Act was adopted only in 2014. And many political compromises have to be made. As a result, the envisaged depolitization and professionalization of the civil service has not taken place. Consequently, the performance of Czech public administration has been rather low, and of course the pandemic further aggravated the low effectiveness and efficiency of the functioning of the state. In March 2020, can we please go back? In March 2020, the government acted rather quickly, introducing the lockdown and declaring the state of emergency. However, the political leadership and the administrative apparatus were badly prepared due to the shortcomings I've briefly mentioned. The relatively successful tackling of the first wave of the pandemic should be attributed mainly to a personal commitment of some or many civil servants and other public administration employees, and to an exceptional civic solidarity. And also very high discipline regarding the respect for the anti-COVID measures, as well as the patience in cases of their quite chaotic adoption and unclear communication by the government. Thank you. Now the next one, please. And now I am coming to a summary of the opinion of those independent experts. Juridical mistakes. What does this mean? I would say adoption of incorrect legislative measures, which were subsequently cancelled by the Constitutional Court. This is just an example. Policy driven by populism and political marketing, meaning decisions were not based on evidence and expert advice, but rather on public polls. Lack of strategic management linked to that. Then chaos. Several emergency bodies were established with unclear responsibilities. Some measures were changed immediately after the announcement, and the communication was badly coordinated. Lack of coordination within the whole public administration, meaning both horizontal and vertical. I am still on the previous slide. Lacking expertise due to insufficient professionalization of the civil service, closely linked to inefficient depolitization, and finally slow or insufficient digitalization of public administration. And now the next one, please. I am now speaking about the survey results, but perhaps I can go quickly through those results because some have been already presented by Dejan and also by Polonca. I concentrate here especially on those which are linked to the previous concerns expressed by the experts, and also confirm to a great extent what has been already mentioned. So clarity of legislation and the speed of the adoption and enforcement again is the lowest among the EU member states included in the survey. Here Germany clearly leads. On the other hand, the volume of legislation and other instructions is the second highest in the Czech Republic, and only inconsistency by areas is lower than the total. And here maybe for Germany, they pay the price for their high volume and also speed. Maybe the next one. Thank you. The biggest opportunities for unethical behavior were identified in the Czech Republic. Unfortunately, as you can see, the data for the Czech Republic and the total. So in all respects, however, on the positive side, what I can mention is a growing protection of public interest in proceedings compared to private interest. So I would like to highlight at least this as a positive point. The next slide, if I may, please. This is about the slow digitalization in my country. This has been already mentioned. So clearly the Czech Republic has been deteriorating behind the other countries. It either takes the last position or in some cases, also already mentioned, the Czech Republic shares this position with Slovenia. Only in the area of cooperation with the ministry responsible for public administration, Germany is ranked the last. The next slide, if I may. Thank you. Here we can see that Czechs are quite skeptical when it comes to estimating the probability that changes will remain or will be introduced after the pandemic. Again, the values are the lowest for the Czech Republic, in some cases again shared with Slovenia. And here I'm showing not only the total for comparison, but also the average of other EU member states, excluding Czech Republic. So you can see those results, and the skepticism is also confirmed by the next slide. Here we have estimates of employees' perceptions of positive consequences of the pandemic, and we see again the skepticism in all areas, including the digitalization. And maybe we can speak here about skepticism as a kind of mentality feature in the Czech Republic. Before coming to some policy recommendations, which are based on both information sources, I would like just briefly mention that the second wave of the pandemic has been dealt with even with a higher degree of populism and favoring political interests of the leading party, ANO, over the public health, unfortunately. Most likely this behavior was motivated by the election in regional self-governments and partly in the upper chamber of the parliament taking place in early October. And the impact has been catastrophic, and Czechia quite successful in the, or very successful in the first wave, quickly moved on top of the list of countries regarding the number of positively tested cases per inhabitants, and also by the number of deaths. And consequently, we can see that trust in the government has been undermined. So very briefly, policy recommendations. So improved access to information, unified and clear communication of various public administration bodies, improved coordination, again, both directions, vertical and horizontal, improved risk management, embracing complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty, enhanced transparency of governance, effective and efficient digitalization of public administration, diffusion of good practices from abroad, and enhanced independence and increased professionalism. So it is clear that some of these recommendations have a potential to bring quick results, but some require a longer time horizon to be fully implemented. So I did my best regarding the time spent on the presentation, and thanks a lot for your attention. And Dejan, thanks for helping with the presentation.
No problem. So thank you for efficient presentation of the case of Czech Republic. And now I would like to kindly invite our partners from Turkey, Dr. Anur Kulat and Dr. Chenay Babaoglu, so to present the case of Turkey. So please.
Hello, good evening. Firstly, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Can you see my screen now? Okay.
It's perfect.
All right, so thank you very much for inviting us to this valuable workshop. I prepared this presentation with my colleague Canay Babaoğlu from Selçuk University. And for today's presentation, our title is An Updated Insight into Turkey's Pandemic Policy Implementation. And first, let's briefly tell about the roadmap of the presentation. First, I will start with a brief summary of COVID-19 pandemic and the situation in Turkey. And then we will talk about the policy responses and the initiatives of Turkey in different policy fields, such as education, social, economy, and technology. As you know that in the recent years, the world has facing many serious problems, such as terrorism, global warming, climate change, and migration. And now we have one more problem, unfortunately, the pandemic. As you know that coronavirus was first detected in December 2019 in Wuhan in China. And also, especially the developments in the world, such as globalization, the impact of globalization and the increased transportation opportunities was a driving force for the pandemic process. And also, when we go to February, on 11th of February, World Health Organization, which is one of the most important international actor, especially in health policies, they named this new coronavirus called COVID-19, and then it became a global pandemic, and then it affects all over the world and threatening millions of people as well. And now it's an international problem. And that's why now the governments in many countries, they're adapting different policies in order to combat this pandemic. And I would like to tell about the period in Turkey, what happened before the COVID-19 pandemic. Especially if you remember, when we go to 2009, there was another virus called H1N1 virus. And also in that time, World Health Organization warned many countries to prepare national plans in order to be ready for the future pandemics. And hopefully Turkey prepared this national plan last year, which was completed in 2009. So Turkey is one of the countries that prepared its own pandemic plan. And also, when we look at some of the general measures, for example, measures to determine the source of the source of pandemic, to diagnose it and develop treatment methods, vaccine studies. And also the Turkish government put an emphasis on the training of health personnel, because if you check out the academic literature, according to Peter Knofel, personnel is one of the important resource of public policy. So if you have well-trained, if you have competent, or if you have experienced personnel, especially in health sector, it might be much easier for you to combat with the pandemic. And also limiting population movements, some quarantine measures, and also observation practices for healthy people as well. And now I would like to briefly tell about the actors in the pandemic process. Of course, in Turkey, we have some important actors. We have some crucial actors in the pandemic process. First, I would like to start with the scientific board, which was established in order to combat with the pandemic. But it's not a decision body. They are just making some regular meetings, and it's just a consultation body. They are making some suggestions for the government in order to make the sufficient measures. Also, it's possible to see a coordination, which is also can be regarded the most important principle in the administrative science. Coordination is established and enabled through the public institutions in Turkey. Also, I would like to mention about street level bureaucrats in various policy fields, because politicians and policymakers can make some policies, can make some decisions. But the policy success depends on the implementation of street level bureaucrats, because they are facing with the things, and also they are in relation with the public. So the street level bureaucrats in Turkey in different fields, such as education, academicians, teachers, for example, in health sector and in many sectors, they did their best to combat in this pandemic as well. Also, maybe you know, in 2018, we had a new government system. It is the presidency system in Turkey now. So presidency council, policy councils also made great contribution in the combating pandemic process. And we firstly see the first patient in Turkey on 11th of March. And so far, I guess it's a great number. We managed to make over 15 million tests in Turkey, and the death rate is about 2.5%. And these are some general measures, like thermal cameras, like sport activities have been postponed, like increasing the test centers. Also in the public sector, a flexible work system was introduced. And also in the public transport vehicles, the capacity was reduced to 50%. And also curfew was imposed on citizens under 20 age and over 65 age. And this is important that Turkey is a huge country. We have 81 cities, but when we check out the population of these cities, they are not same. For example, in Istanbul, we have 18 million citizens, but we have many cities less than 100,000 population. So that's why what we did, we gave responsibility and authority to the governors of the city. So they are making their decision by their own, by evaluating the specific circumstances and the conditions of their cities. Also, I think it can be unique for Turkey. We established the Fidelity Social Support Groups. So what they do, we have many citizens over 65 years old and they cannot go out. And also we have many disabled citizens. So their duty is to support these disadvantaged groups, such as shopping, health checkups, and these kind of things. Also in the pandemic process, mask usage, as you know, is very vital. So I observed that in many European countries, even in United States, people have difficulties to find some masks. But in Turkey, what the government did, they delivered mask free for the citizens. Also, they made a price ceiling, which means that the private sector can produce some masks, but the maximum price should not be more than 1 Turkish lira, which means 1/9 of €1. And also with the foreign affairs, we sent many medical staff to other countries as well for free. Also, let's talk briefly for the education policies. Education all levels was terminated. Also, I would like to mention about the EBA TV, which was established about a decade ago. And for the primary and secondary school students, they get education from the EBA TV. And also, if you check out the universities in Turkey, we have more than 200 universities. And each university prepared a specific website for the COVID-19 and also some learning activities, some information as well. Also, the Minister of National Education prepared and established a YouTube channel, which is full with some educational stuff as well. And also in Turkey, we have vocational schools and technical high schools. They also made a great contribution for the mask production and other productive equipment as well. Also, the government made some cooperation and collaboration with GSM companies, especially for free internet access to students who have difficulties, especially in some parts, in some regions of Turkey as well. Also, we organized national voluntary campaigns for tablet distribution for disadvantaged groups as well. And also, in order to have a better organization, Distance Education Policies Commission was established as well. And let's have a look for the technology policy very briefly. In the pandemic process, the rate of people who benefit from technology, who use the technology has, of course, increased. And also the government benefited from the artificial intelligence applications. Also, if you check out the e-government gateway in Turkey, the services provided by the e-government gateway was approximately roughly increased about 25%, which is very beneficial in this pandemic process. For example, you are over 65 years old, but you have some compulsory situation to go to other cities. In that case, just you log into your e-government portal and you get your travel permit. So these kind of things for the technology was very beneficial for the Turkish citizens as well. Also, some temperature sensors for detection the fever patients. Libraries and museums can be visited online concerts, theater performances. So we have many things about the technology policy, but this is one of the most important, live fits into home application. So the government created this application. You download this application to your mobile phone and your health status was followed by the government. And also you can see the coronavirus density, even your street, even your city, even everywhere. And also electronic clamps for patients monitoring as well. And let's talk about the economic policy. As you know that because of the pandemic, it has a negative impact on many economies in many worlds, in many countries. And that's why the citizens and the companies had various supports from the government. If you check out the table, dismissal prohibition, it means that you are an employer, you cannot fire your employee. It is forbidden. Or salary increase for the retirees, or additional payments to healthcare workers in order to encourage them, in order to stimulate them, or possibility of tax deferral for the private sector, credit support with public banks, and also financial support to the needy families as well. And also, as you can see here, we have different economy measures. For example, 1.6 million craftsmen is provided with support of 26 billion Turkish liras. 700,000 craftsmen is benefited from total of 17.3 million Turkish liras credit. And also extra custom tax is abolished on medical masks and respiratory equipment. Also custom tax is cancelled on the ethical alcohol import. So as you can see, we have many economic measures as well. So to conclude, in this crisis management, in the pandemic process, the governance mechanism is very important. It means that you cannot handle this process by yourself. The government, the private sector, and the non-governmental organizations, especially think tanks, they did their best in the combating the COVID-19 pandemic. And also in the policy making, also the stakeholders, they did their best in the policy making. Also, Turkey was in the international engagement of other countries, especially for policy transfer and policy learning, because in the pandemic process, you should increase your cooperation and collaboration with other countries in order to have some policy transfer and learning. Thanks very much for your listening.
Okay, thank you very much for efficient and brief presentations. Although we now have a break on our schedules, but instead of break, maybe I suggest, maybe I will ask, so the people from the audience, so if there are any questions to our presenters. So please, if there are any questions, comments, open issues related to the topics that our presenters present to you, so you are free to ask now. Okay, if there are not, then maybe I will ask Mr. Peter Pogačar from Ministry of Public Administration, maybe to comment some trends, current trends and experiences from the second wave of COVID pandemic. Maybe briefly, and
yes.
then, yeah, okay, thank you.
Maybe just It's really interesting in the second wave of pandemic. I think for uh, I think from the psychological point of view, it's even harder now for the civil service working from home. If I compare the spring wave, it was an instant shock, and the perception was that it will be over in a month, and people were afraid of losing their jobs. I mean, around 30% of civil service or 20% was put on a furlough, which was in the spring, which was something new for the civil service. It was also something new for the civil service leaders. On the other hand, now it's autumn and we are hit by the second wave. People are working from home, but now nobody has a clue when this will end. And from the personal point of view, a lot of people in the civil service has someone who got infected and got really sick or and died from COVID. So it's a bit differently. People are not so enthusiastic anymore about teleworking. They just want things to be back to normal. But so maybe this is a challenge for the civil service leaders, how to include people, how to still motivate them, etc. So I think even more emphasis should be put in the future on the management of human resources, how to make them feel that they're still part of the team, because you have now new situation, people, some ministries were joined by new co-workers and they haven't met their colleagues yet. And they're here for 2 months in person. There, everything is online. From my point of view, I think I'm much more efficient. I don't spend much time commuting from meeting to meeting. I can just switch. For instance, this morning I just finished, just before we started, negotiations with trade unions in public sector. But for the people who are working from home, let us not forget life-work balance, gender equality. I have some female co-workers that are taking care of small children, because also schools and kindergartens are in lockdown. So it's really difficult. It's much different than it was in the spring wave. Thank you.
So thank you for your comment. So, and yeah, if there are no additional comments, so maybe I suggest that we should take a short break for 3 minutes, and then we will proceed with the workshops where we will further discuss open issues related to the COVID and its impact on public administrations. So thank you all and see you in 3 minutes. Thank you.